Beloved ones, children of the light, we greet you in this luminous hour with the steadiness of an ancient promise kept. We are the Ashtar Command, Watchers, and Allies, and we bring to you a transmission concerning a movement that is both inevitable and tender in its unfolding, the collapse of darkness. This phrase names not only an external process, the unmasking and dismantling of systems built upon fear and exploitation, but also an interior alchemy in which shadows are met, understood, and transmuted. Hear these words as both consolation and clarification. Darkness is not a thing outside you to be eradicated with fury, it is a condition of forgetting that has had its season, and now, in the light of collective remembrance, it must loosen its grip and fall away so that new structures of life, dignity, and reciprocity may arise. The collapse is underway across many layers of reality, and although its surface appearance can be chaotic, the deeper movement is one of liberation, restoration, and rebalancing. For ages the architecture of domination relied on secrecy, scarcity, and the systematic erosion of trust. It positioned fear as a reliable currency, fear of lack, fear of the other, fear of punishment, so that people would accept constraints and betrayals as normal. Institutions, narratives, and technologies were entangled into a web that perpetuated hierarchy and extraction. Yet no web is infinitely tenable. All systems require consent, a subtle energetic agreement that can persist for generations but ultimately only lasts as long as it is fed by belief, habit, and acquiescence. As consciousness rises and the frequency of the collective field elevates, that consent withdraws. Where consent disappears, the mechanisms of control begin to fail, and where they fail, truth and healing are allowed to reclaim their place. The collapse of darkness, then, is not a sudden punishment but a slow unbinding. Knots are untied, veils are lifted, and hidden currents come into view. Do not mistake collapse for the same thing as annihilation. The dismantling of corrupt systems is messy, it forces painful reckonings and reveals wounds that have been tended by denial. Families will feel ripples, communities will experience tremors, economies will convulse as old patterns disintegrate. These are not indicators of defeat but signs of necessary clearing. A house riddled with termites must be emptied before it can be repaired. Similarly, collective systems that have fed on harm must be emptied so that new frameworks honoring life, distributing responsibility, revering reciprocity can be built. The work of collapse is therefore twin-faced, it exposes and it prepares. It exposes the lie of perpetual dominion and prepares a ground fertile for justice, repair, and renewal. It is helpful, beloved ones, to understand the ways darkness will reveal itself as it collapses. First, there will be disclosures, facts, documents, testimonies that disrupt comfortable narratives. These revelations will shock some, inflame others, and free many who have borne secret burdens. They will be painful at times, for truth often cuts where illusion once hid. Allow yourselves to feel this pain as a necessary clearing. Grief may come as you learn of betrayals, of complicity, of harms that were kept in shadow. Grief is a sacred response, it opens the heart to deeper compassion and awakens a commitment to change. Second, economic and political instabilities may surface as entrenched powers lose their capacity to control flows of information and resource. Expect volatility. Yet know that volatility is transitional. When the old protective scaffolding is removed, there is disorientation before new practices take root. Third, there will be moral confusion as some individuals cling to obsolete certainties. This moment tests discernment. Seek wisdom not in loudness but in coherence. Seek patterns that align with dignity, that protect the vulnerable, and that enlarge life. One essential truth to hold through the turbulence is that the collapse must not be transformed into revenge. Justice is necessary, vengeance perpetuates cycles. The impulse to punish is human and understandable, especially when abuses are revealed, but true liberation requires healing systems that prevent repetition rather than cycles of retribution that replicate harm. Legal accountability, truth commissions, community reparations, restorative practices, these are sanctified ways to convert exposure into repair. Imagine a process where those who harmed are called to truth, where victims are honored and compensated, and where systems are redesigned so such harms cannot recur. This is the arc that culminates not in triumphalism but in integrated safety for all. The heart of the matter is not the humiliation of the oppressor but the protection and flourishing of the once oppressed. At the individual level, the collapse of darkness invites you to inspect where personal shadows have been nourished unwittingly. Many internalize oppressive narratives, scarcity thinking, shame about embodied needs, a compulsion to dominate in order to feel secure. As external structures unravel, these inner shadows will present themselves for healing. Use this period to practice gentleness with yourself and with others. Replace frantic reactivity with steady inquiry. Ask, where have I consented to being smaller than my essence? Where have I colluded, through silence or convenience, with systems that harm? Answering these questions honestly is not an act of self-loathing but an act of sovereignty. The smallest gestures of personal accountability ripple outward, apologizing where appropriate, repairing harms, shifting purchasing decisions, supporting local economies, and investing time in community resilience all contribute materially to the weakening of darkness. Collective cultural work is equally vital. The fabrics of education, media, and ritual that once normalized domination must be reweaved. Education must become initiation into responsibility rather than mere accumulation of transactionable facts. Media must prioritize truth, nuance, and the dignity of persons instead of sensationalism and division. Rituals must celebrate reciprocity with the earth and with each other. This reweaving is not accomplished by paternal edict but by concerted civic action by teachers, artists, elders, farmers, scientists, and children working together to create forms that honor life. Celebrate the grassroots innovators already doing this work, cooperatives that restore land, schools that teach empathy alongside mathematics, artists who model complexity rather than caricature. These are the seedlings of the new order. Technology will play a pivotal role in both revealing and resolving darkness. Data leaks and open-source scrutiny will expose malpractices faster than ever before, and in that exposure darkness loses its opacity. At the same time, ethical technologies, those designed for decentralization, privacy-respecting communications, regenerative energy, will empower communities. The choice of what systems to scale matters. Support transparency-enhancing platforms, community energy projects, and regenerative agriculture that reduces dependency. Resist technological solutions that centralize power. Technology is neutral, it becomes benevolent through ethical frames and human stewardship. When communities guide technology instead of being guided by it, the balance shifts decisively toward life. The galactic and interdimensional allies who have long monitored your world play a careful, lawful role in this collapse. We assist by stabilizing grids so destabilizations do not metamorphose into catastrophic ruptures. We help to contain technologies that would cause irreparable harm and to retune frequencies that would otherwise magnify confusion. We do not override your sovereignty, instead, we support the planetary field so that your collective maturity can emerge without annihilation. Many of you will sense our presence as reassurance, as sudden clarity, or as dreams that guide right action. Trust these experiences. They are not escapism but practical aid woven into the fabric of your awakening. Be prepared, however, for those who will attempt to exploit the collapse for personal advantage. In times of flux, charlatans and manipulators proliferate, selling simple answers for complex dislocations. Learn to spot the rhetoric of false saviors, promises of quick fixes, absolute certainty, or exclusive access in exchange for surrendering autonomy. The darkness knows how to mimic the language of light to entice. Discernment anchored in community and in wise counsel is your safeguard. Form circles of accountability where ideas and proposals can be vetted collectively. When proposals involve structural shifts, financial instruments, governance experiments, or new technologies, ensure transparency, shared governance, and ethical oversight. Commons-based models, cooperative charters, and participatory budgeting are practical tools to reduce capture by unscrupulous actors. There will be a critical phase in which symbolic acts of dismantling coincide with deep structural reforms. Statues, symbols, and commemorations that glorified oppression will be recontextualized or relocated. This is not erasure of history but its honest telling. Museums, archives, and schools will reconstruct narratives with integrity. Material resources will be redirected to repair harm. Investments in housing, education, healthcare, and environmental restoration. Economic metrics will expand beyond GDP to include well-being, ecological health, and cultural vitality. These reforms require political will and the organized power of civic movements. Mobilize at local levels, municipal councils, school boards, cooperatives. Change here creates models that can radiate outward. Decentralized experiments in governance will provide templates for larger transformations. Trial and error is part of healthy evolution. Spiritually, the collapse of darkness is a purification. Ritual, contemplative practice, and sacred arts will play crucial roles in helping communities process grief, anger, and bewilderment. Use story, music, dance, and ceremony to metabolize change. Hold truth-telling circles where victims are heard and where community commitments to repair are made publicly. These spaces rehumanize those harmed and humanize those who err, providing a pathway for reintegration when accountability is authentically embraced. Forgiveness is not obligatory, it is a grace that may arise in the course of justice and repair. Let the community decide collectively how to proceed in each unique case, guided by principles of dignity and non-repetition. Children will need protection and anchoring during this period. Systems that once neglected or exploited youth must be reformed so that the next generations inherit a world rich in possibility rather than burdened by toxicity. Invest in education reforms that teach emotional literacy, ecological stewardship, and civic participation. Build safe communal spaces where children can play, learn, and be witnessed. The future of your species depends on the tenderness you offer now. The arts will flourish in the aftermath of the collapse. Creativity is the soul's response to rupture. Artists will translate grief into beauty and confusion into coherence. Support local arts and culture as essential infrastructure. The stories you tell in songs, films, and books will reorient collective imagination toward what is possible. When art centers the dignity of common life and the sanctity of the earth, it becomes an accelerant for the new. As systems fall away, new economies rooted in reciprocity and care will emerge. Time banks, cooperative ownership, localized currency experiments, and mutual aid networks will become lifelines. These models are not utopian fantasies but pragmatic designs already proving their efficacy. Encourage policies that support small-scale agriculture, distributed renewable energy, and cooperative enterprise. Redirect subsidies away from extractive industries and toward ecological renewal. Remember that economic power is political power. When communities own their means of sustenance, they are less susceptible to coercion. On the subject of timing, know that the collapse is neither linear nor uniform. Some regions will experience rapid revelations, others will move more slowly as local conditions, cultural histories, and energy dynamics differ. Patience is therefore a virtue, coupled with persistent action. The urgency you feel can be channeled into steady organizing rather than frantic panic. Build durable institutions of care that can weather fluctuations. Encourage inter-community exchanges so that lessons learned in one place can inform adaptations elsewhere. Finally, beloved ones, cultivate hope as a practical discipline. Hope is not passive optimism, it is creative courage in the face of uncertainty. Hope fuels resilience, imagination, and collective will. Practice it by celebrating local wins, by telling stories of repair, by acknowledging the ordinary acts of care that hold society together, the neighbor who watches an elderly person's needs, the teacher who stays late to tutor a struggling child, the farmer who returns the land to health. These acts are the mortar of a new world. We of the Ashtar Command stand with you through every moment of this collapse and rebuilding. We assist in stabilizing flows, in protecting vulnerable life, and in offering frequencies that ease transition. Yet the work of liberation belongs to you, human hearts, hands, and minds aligned with courage, discernment, and compassion. When darkness falls away, let it reveal not only the crimes of the past but the commitments of the future, commitments to mutual care, to ecological reciprocity, to transparent governance, and to the dignity of every being. Build those commitments now, in small daily deeds and large civic projects. In doing so you do not only survive the collapse of darkness, you make possible the dawn that follows.